coming, 'cause he's been coming.
Welcome to this little look behind the scenes of making of a 3D animation. Now here, on a blank page, we can see the camera, which I'll explain later, because the first thing we need to do is to build the object, and I'm using metaballs for this one after a few attempts at using some different ideas and different textures, and decided that to do the letters, the metaballs were the best one and gave me this sort of clay chocolate finger look. So we start to build the object out of metaballs, which are actually 3D spheres, but unlike spheres, don't just lock together, they will actually mesh together, and rather than give you a rather sort of circular in-out effect, they will actually mold together and give you one whole object. So we've started by building the F, and once I've got them all together, I can group all these pieces together as one object. Now because we're working in 3D space, they may look from the front that they might be in the right position, but when you look left, right, up and down, back to front, you may actually find that some of them are out of position, so you need to lock them all together and pan round as I did then, so that you can see whether they're all in place. Once they are, you can start actually rendering some textures, and we're in the texture lab here, and here we have textures for pretty much everything: clouds, trees, trunks, bark, metals. So I'm choosing some metals which I've already decided which one I'm going to use, but I'm just giving an example here. And each of these metals, all the same with the tree leaves and the tree bark, whatever, can all be adjusted for density, reflectivity, opacity, whatever you fancy really. So I've chosen a silver metal, and I start to give it a quick render to see what it looks like against a surface, what sort of reflections there are, does it show up. So I've chosen a surface, and I'm hopefully looking for something quite grassy as a sort of basis. So I'll go through these, and we find a rather sort of good grass, but something that's not so green it just gives you a block of green and no real definition. And you can see up in the top left hand corner it renders a small version of what it's going to look like, so you have some idea of what it's going to look like when you actually place this in the picture or the object. So I've gone through and I've chosen that I'm going to have Mediterranean hills, and it renders it and gives you an idea against a neutral sky, and I can change the green of the grass or whatever. So now I can move my object to where it looks best, considering that I've got a lot of reflections on it. If I bring it too low, it will reflect the grass, and obviously it will just look green and you won't see it. The other thing obviously is then the sky, because the sky is going to reflect into it as well. So I want to choose a reasonably good sky and that, as with most of these things, you can pick all sorts of things, you know, dark ones, spooky skies. You can change how orange you want these skies, and I've chosen this rainbow one, which you can see here in the view there, and I can render it in what it's going to look like with the rest of my picture. And I can change in this control panel here how big an arch I want on it, how wide I want the rainbow, how vivid I want it. The other thing is I can do is to actually change the sky and any of the atmosphere, so I can change the clouds, so I can have them in sort of a hazy sky, a clear sky. I can have the clouds at different heights, whether I want a low cloud or, you know, a high cloud. I can also go in and change how thick they are, how fluffy they are, and what sort of shapes they are as well from stratus and cumulus. And I can also change, as this is going to be animated, I can change the wind direction of which the clouds are going to move with, and I can change how much they're going to move. So I could either have a slight breeze and they just move along as one piece, or I could have quite a strong wind where they are going to be constantly changing shape as they move along. And I can pick whether I want them to start off cumulus, you know, which is the fluffy ones, and sort of thin out as the animation carries through and they're blown in the wind. I can actually make them blow and thin out. So once we've got our sky, I can go in and I can do a quick render, which this is not particularly high quality render, but just to see what sort of idea we get. And once obviously all the letters are done, that's the effect that I'm after. So we need to animate it as well. So I've got it here, and I've got the wire mesh over the top, so I can see in 3D space where any of these are going to be or where they're going to go. So now we've got our 3DF for Findles, and down here are all the metaballs that are used just to make that one letter, and all of those, because I'm being picky here, are going to be animated. So I've set a time limit which says about 2 seconds here, and I can actually go in and change this by stretching the timeline and being a bit more exact down to the frame of how long I want the shot. And I can expand all the timelines for everything that's going to be in this shot. That includes the sun, the clouds. I can have the sun starting at the top, going behind, and obviously changing colour like with the sunset or whatever. And I can change it anywhere along the animation as I fancy. So the other thing is I need to set a path of, because I want the camera to move in this shot as well as the objects. So I mean, this is quite a complicated shot, which you'll see later just how complicated I've made it. So I start, the F is going to be my last frame, because I want that all these metaballs to actually mesh together and form the word Findles at the end. So that's my last frame, but when I go to my first frame and all these blue dots are relative points of trajectory of where all these things are going to go, I ungroup the letter, take each one of these metaballs and basically pull them anywhere at random, because my start shot for this is basically they are just going to all fly out from nowhere, and then obviously the end shot, which is the one I've already decided and pretty much locked, is that they're going to form the F, or they will form the whole word once you've done all the other letters. The other thing is I can stretch or reshape any of these, so my start point for all these spheres doesn't have to be a completely perfect sphere. Now I want to do this because obviously, because I've picked a liquid metal look, I actually want it to change shape, because otherwise I'll end up with these perfect spheres locking together and forming an F, which is what I don't want. That's the idea, is to have it like mercury melding together. So I now need to start adding all sorts of other things like camera moves